Okay, everybody, thank you very much. And thank you very much for the previous lecture. It was really interesting. If that lecture was on the kind of sociology of happiness, it might be that my lecture is kind of on the anthropology of unhappiness. Because this is about people who have both choices are bad. And how do you navigate the world when both of your choices are bad? Please take a look at this if you can. This is one of the websites, the largest website on refugee voices, refugee narratives in Japan. It's in Japanese and in English. It's all done by students in our program, almost all gakubusen, undergraduate students. So we'll return to that. We're going to turn on this thing. So I'm going to give a quick introduction to the class, kind of so you get a feeling for the kind of class that we give at the Faculty of Liberal Arts. I'll talk a little bit about the change in Japan, how to pick the right college for you, you and your parents, and the secret, if we have enough time, the secret of getting into FLA. But we might not have enough time for that, so I don't know about that. So, it's important to recognize that, like other liberal arts programs, we start off with a firm foundation of reading and writing and critical thinking and critical skills. You don't pick your major until the middle of your second year. I was sure that I would be an English major when I went to college, and then I walked into an anthropology class and went, oh my God, something else is happening here. I need to study anthropology. And I'm sure when you come to my class, that's exactly how you will feel, that you'll need to study anthropology. So this class, we're divided. We have three majors in Faculty of Liberal Arts. One, comparative culture. Second one is social studies. Another one is international business and economics. And you will major in one of those three. And then within that, you'll take a specialization in one of the subfields. So this class is from the social studies discipline major with an anthropology and sociology within that. This is all the courses for 1 year, just in anthropology and sociology. So there's a lot of courses just within that one major in 1 year. The following year, there'll be totally different classes, right? And it's a very important thing to remember because we'll come back to this later in the lecture. So the class I'm going to show you here is about the middle of the total numbers of classes here. So it's after the introduction class, but before the seminar classes. So I'll give you just an idea of some of the other similar kinds of classes. We have a whole bunch of classes that are focused on getting you out of the classroom, getting you into the city, into society, into the world. This is one by Professor Fair. It's called Nishiogiology. Right, is the study of Nishiyogi Kubo. He lives in Ogikubo, he sits around and drinks and eats in Ogikubo, and he brings students out to study food culture and what food tells us about culture, about the city, about individuals. It's actually in Japanese and in English. This is a bilingual project that he and his students have been working on now for, I think, 4 years. Here's another one of our professors, Professor Ito. He looks at sustainability, and the course is Meaning for Life, Art, Digitality, and Field-Based Learning. So they go up all over Japan to do field work, and here's him with all of his classes. I think this is Hokkaido, so he brings them all up there. Here's Professor Nakano, who looks at peace education, trying to address issues of peace and war and the larger kind of political acumen here in our lives. Professor Watanabe looks at how nature is part of even our city life, right? There's a lot, Tokyo is one of the most has the more green stuff in it than many other cities, and how we interact with nature and how we participate in nature or sometimes don't participate in nature. This website and their results happens to be in Japanese. So my class, which is similar to these other classes, is called Digital Oral Narratives, and it started in right after 3/11. How many people were here in Japan in 2011? So you all remember that. At that time, we were all sitting there going, what should we be doing? How should we be teaching? How can we be teaching something that is relevant to our city and our world around us? And so what we started to do is going up to Tohoku every weekend to do relief work, and also at the same time, we're doing interviews. We realized many times people from Tohoku they wanted to tell their story and have us listen to their story, and that was more important to them than having us help dig out their houses. That the story, the narrative, being able to give your view of things is sometimes more important than many of the more material things in life. We also did a project with many of the youth activists, the anti-nuclear activists. Then we moved into another project right here in the church that is next to us. They have takidashi every morning, and a whole line of homeless men come, and they're kind of hiding. The homeless men in Tokyo, there's a lot of them in Tokyo, but you almost never see them, right? Because they know how to stay out of sight. We worked in the takidashi, we served the curry rice, delicious Korean rice, and interviewed them about their lives. So these are some of the projects that we've been doing in the past. Since 2016, we've been working on refugees and migrants. And all the stuff you see are all generated out of that class. It's all, the students organize the interviews, they do all the digital rendering. We'll talk a little bit more about the technology later on, but everything comes from this class. So, research in digital oral narratives. So, the idea of refugee is actually a relatively new idea. It's not something that has a long, long history. In fact, before World War II, there was a word that was common in French, but not very common in English, refugee, but it didn't have a particular precise meaning, right? Here, during the World War II, there were 60 million people displaced, moved out of their cities, out of their countries, out of their homes, and spread all over Europe and also all over Asia. And it created a huge problem. How are we to deal with this displaced population? Now, in that time, this is just kind of a side note, in that time there was a guy named Sugihara who was in this little city, a little country called Lithuania. Recently he's gotten a little bit more promotion. But Japan was working with the Nazis at the time. The Nazis asked him to make sure to funnel all the Jews over here so they could be contained and ultimately maybe exterminated. But instead, he decided to give out visas to all of the Jews and allow them to escape. So he was really one of the heroes of World War II on the Japanese side. So in 1951, war is over. Right? And we still have these people with no place to be. They have no place to go. And so they drew up a refugee convention, right? And the refugee convention basically said there's this new kind of person in the world, and we're going to identify them as a refugee and define them in this way. A refugee is someone who has been forced to flee his or her own country because of persecution, war, or violence. But they also talked about the types of persecution that they recognize, right? Well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular party. Does anybody think about some type of persecution that now we see, but maybe was missing there? Sexual identity or sexual orientation, a very common kind of persecution. That was not part of the convention. Anything else connected to sustainability? Environmental refugees. Again, a very important population, not part of the refugee. So this was a document from 1951 when the world was quite different. So here, just so we're sure, a migrant is someone who decides to leave. I'm a migrant. I decided to leave America and I came to Japan because I wanted to, for my choice. And if things don't work out here, I can always go back home. How many people are migrants? How many people in this room are living in another country that's not their own passport, by choice? It's a big club. Welcome to the club, right? A refugee is a little bit different. A refugee is somebody who has been forced from their home, right? And because of war or violence, and often without warning, and they're unable to return for fear of being killed oftentimes, and sometimes just incarcerated, but nevertheless. If there are any refugees in this room, please email me at this number, and there's a bunch of support that Sophia provides for refugees. So to understand the study and the research, this is a basic definition. So turn to the person. Now, so one of the things about FLA, right? You need to be talking to each other, right? You don't only learn from us, you need to be talking to each other. So I'm going to give you a feeling for that. I hope you're sitting next to somebody who's a total stranger, right? And ask them, name between you guys one or two rights that you have now. Rights. Give me a right that you have now that you enjoy right now. So talk to the people next to you and come up with at least one, maybe two rights. Go ahead. You have 30 seconds. Go ahead. Fifteen seconds. Start from here. Got a good one? Go you first. You got a good one? Got some. All right, okay. All right, let's go for you guys. What do you got? You have the right to study. Okay, you have the right to study. It's not exactly a right. Not everybody here has a right to study, right? You have a right to study if you pass a bunch of tests and pay a bunch of money and all that kind of stuff. But okay, that's one of the possibilities. What else? Do you guys have something? Freedom of speech, absolutely. Freedom of speech is a fundamental right that you enjoy. Same one. What else? Somebody else. Yeah.
Mobility rights.
Excuse me? Mobility rights. You can move about. Okay? So all those rights and a bunch of other rights, in fact, all the rights that you have, right, come from a particular place. They all come from a state. States give you those rights. If you're Japanese, Japan gives you those rights. If you're American, America gives you those rights. Rights come from states, right? As a citizen, you can claim those rights. If you're a refugee and you fled one country and are seeking asylum in another country, that's what you don't have. You don't have rights. Right? You cannot claim. You've already left one and you're not yet in another place. You cannot claim those rights. And this creates a problem. So the Refugee Convention, one of the things the Refugee Convention does is try to get some basic fundamental human rights here. Right? It says even if you're not in a particular country yet, you have the right to non-refoulement. Right? That's my bad American pronunciation of the French word. It means you have the right to not be returned to the place of persecution, right? You have a right not to be returned to the place that is trying to kill you, for example, right? And you also have the right to protection in the country you go to, right? So if the country has signed the Refugee Convention, right, then those countries agree that they will not send you back even if you show up, and they will also take care of you while you're here. So Japan signed the Refugee Convention in 1981. It was a happy Sugihara, right? He worked a long time, 4 decades earlier, for exactly this kind of outcome. So Japan has signed it. Now, when Japan signed it, though, the world was a very different place, right? In the 1980s, we had about 100 million, right? A million refugees. That's a lot. A million is a lot, right? But it wasn't the kind of numbers it is now. But we have big cataclysmic events, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the start of the Kosovo War. Every event like that creates displacement. It moves people out, people who have no connection to the fighting itself. But the fighting goes on here, and it pushes all you guys out. Fighting goes on here, pushes all you guys out, right? So from 2010, what we've seen is an exponential rise in the number of refugees. It was kind of going little bit by little bit, but from 2010, it's increased hugely, all the way up to 2020, right, where we're looking at 100 million. Right? And in fact, a bunch of people, like people in Ukraine who never imagined that they would be refugees at all, suddenly now find themselves displaced. In fact, here from 2022, 7 million of them. Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, these have had long histories of refugee displacement because of all kinds of different problems. If we go all the way up to now, we're looking at 117 million people who are displaced, right? Some of them are in different countries, some of them are in their own country, right? But they're not at home anymore. Now, this seems like a lot, but it's a little bit hard to figure out. If Tokyo is about 12 million, we're looking at about 10 Tokyos. Or 10 Tokyos, that's how many people displaced in the world, right? If all the people, all the displaced people were a country, it would be larger than the population of the UK, or of France, or of Italy, or of South Africa, or Tanzania, or a whole bunch of other. It would be a big, major country. That's how many people are displaced around the world. Now, this kind of historical data and statistical data is super important. Right? But just like sociology, right, we move between the individual and the larger society and the world around it, from the macro into the micro. And so I'm going to show you a short video that I have to give you a trigger warning because it's kind of upsetting. Right? There's no words to it, so if you don't want to watch it, but it is an upsetting video, and you can put your head down and you'll be okay because there's no words. Okay?
Happy birthday to you.
Make a wish. Granny.
Have you done your homework?
Adam. That's fine.
Ready or not? Here it comes.
Arming clashes with British.
So, yeah,
Airstrikes on rebel position.
we are going to stay.
Heavy fighting in Richmond. Rebel forces advance.
Happy birthday to you. Make a wish, darling.
So here they use the example of Syria, but it could have been a whole bunch of other countries. And I think that's the point. You know, when we look at refugees, quote unquote refugees in the media, right, we're flooded with images of them, right? And a simple data analysis, my students went through the data analysis of the visual representations of refugees in the Japanese media. And the three things are, they're poor, they're far away, and there's a lot of them. Right? Those are the three kinds of characteristics among all the diversity. And it's a legitimate thing to ask ourselves, somebody who is so different in such different situations from us, are we actually able to understand where they're coming from and their situation? Are we connected in any way to what they're doing? Is it possible to put ourselves in that situation? Could this ever be us? So here, the Jews here never expected that they would be put into concentration camps. Right? It was a completely unexpected thing. And here, this is also a bunch of people who never expected to be here. What was it? It was Colorado. What would this be? Japanese internment camps. Bunches of Japanese came to America to work. Some of them had citizenship by this time, right? Contributing to the economy, contributing to society, and America decided to put them into concentration camps. Internment camps. They did not kill them. So it's a different thing, but they did take their mobility and their freedom away from them for reasons that had nothing to do with what they did. But this was a long time ago, right? Here in the refugee camp in South Sudan in Africa, this is one of the biggest refugee camps in the world, and if we look back over there, it just goes on and on and on. Here's another place. Anybody know what this is? Oh, Minami Sarik in Miyagi, where a whole bunch of displaced people lived for years. Right? This is a temporary shelter that temporary was up to 5, 6, 7 years sometimes. Right? Again, nobody in the richest, safest country in the world, and yet they find themselves displaced in similar kinds of ways. These were some of the places that our students were doing relief work while they were doing interviews as well. So to be persecuted, this is the life of a refugee. To be persecuted, forcibly displaced, no passport ID, no legal rights in your new country, no access to health care, no ability to work, fear of being deported at any time. This is how a refugee lives on a day-to-day basis. Now, Japan is very aware of the refugee crisis. They signed the Refugee Convention 81, right? And Japan is one of the most generous donors to the UNHCR, to the international body that manages refugees. This number here means after America, Japan has the largest amount of donations. And usually the EU is put all together, right? Sometimes Germany is by itself, right? So it's always up there, depending on the fluctuation of the dollar and the yen, second or third, something like that, right? And actually, Ogata Sadako was one of the primary people to make sure that Japan is a leader in doing that, right? And she was also a Jewish professor. So that's half of it. You give money for refugees far, far away. But what happens when refugees are coming here? Right? That's the other half of it. Right? Here, in 2017, when the number of refugees coming into Japan peaked, it was almost 20,000. So these are a number of people who are coming to Japan for refugee recognition, who've been persecuted at their home, and now they're coming to Japan saying, can we have refuge here? So it's hard to know exactly. Now, if we put this in an EU context that year, yeah, way more went applied to Germany and more to France and Italy and Sweden. But Japan is down here. So if we put it in an EU context, it's still one of the top 10. So it's a fair amount of numbers, right? A pretty large number. So the question is, in that year, how many people were recognized? In that year of almost 20,000 applicants, how many people did Japan give refugee recognition to? So this is what I'm going to ask you in the quiz. Anybody who gets the quiz right gets to come into FLA. So, and no checking your phones. So here, let's just put it on. This is some of the other nations that year. Germany, right? Germany had a ton of people applying, right? And they let in this many, for a batting average for about 25%, right? So not a super great batting average compared to some places, but there's so many applicants, right? So some place like Canada only had 20,000, about the same, but they had a almost 60% acceptance rate. So this is the other countries that were in that year. So if Japan is like Germany, they had about 25%, it would be 4,000 acceptances. Recognition, yes, say, you can be a refugee here, we'll take you in and we'll recognize you as a refugee. If they want to be like Canada, it's about 50%, but Japan's population and GDP is much bigger than both Canada and then Germany. Now Germany's kind of bumped Japan out, but, so just talk with your partner just for 10 seconds, how many did Japan let in that year? All right, and let's go for you guys. How many? Pardon me? 20. 20?
All of them.
All of them. 10, what? 2,000. Oh, we already did you, sorry. All of them again. Wow, Japan is so nice. Because Japan's pretty rich, and even if you let in 20,000, right, that's just a blip on the screen, right? Somebody over here is coming to Joji. You guys gotta go someplace else, sorry. 20 is right. Somebody did her homework. 20. So this is the number of, so almost 20,000 people applied, but Japan's recognition process is very slow, so they only gave 12,000 decisions of either yes or no. For 20 people, not 20%, it's 20 individual people. So at that point, suddenly refugee is a big story, right? All the papers had it. The symbolism of 20,000 applicants and 20 acceptance was too good a story to pass up. Unhappy Ogata, unhappy Sugihara. So here, this is another way to look at it. Over time, this is the number of applicants, and during that time, while the refugee crisis around the world was raging and applicants were increasing in Japan, sometimes this goes down into single figures, like 5 and 6, right? So this is a gap. Now, if I was a political scientist like Nakano, I would ask, what is Japan's responsibility in a global crisis? I mean, does Japan have to take these people in? Should they take them in? Don't we have our own problems here? And if we have our own problems, should we address those first? Or are these problems so large that we should be accepting and addressing those? Or is that the wrong way to think of it? Is it really a, we'll take care of our people or their people? Or is there some other way to think of it? Why does it happen? Right? Japan that gives so much money to keep refugees over there has so little cooperation back here. So, for anthropologists though, we look at it a little bit differently. When we see this gap, we're not asking about Japan's responsibility because that's another discipline. For us, we're anthropologists, we want to figure out how people are living. How, if there's 20,000 being accepted and only 20,000 applying and only 20 accepted, how do they survive? How do they live? Where do they live? Right? What is their possibility of survival here? And that's what we're asking. And that's where the start of the class was. The class started saying, well, we got to do some background research, right? Are there refugee camps in Japan? No, there's no camps. In fact, most refugees around the world do not live in camps. They live in cities, and they're dispersed in different kinds of cities. Can they work? Nope, all of them must wait at least 6 months, but oftentimes, even after 6 months, they don't get permission. So some of the refugees that we're supporting have been here 20 years and still don't have work permission. Do they have health care? Nope. Same thing as with work. Do they have social welfare? Very, very little and unevenly distributed. So how do they live? What is the possibility of living? We looked at the background literature. We tried to find studies in English or in Japanese that talked about how they live, and we found almost nothing, right? So the students did their own research and started two things. First, they started doing all this background research, locating in Tokyo where the refugees lived, started to get to know them, invited them to Tokyo, right? Invited them to Sofia in order to get to know them and give them a safe space to be in Tokyo. It's not many safe spaces to be if you're a refugee in Tokyo. And once they got to know enough, then we started interviewing, and that was the part of the formal class. Here is a couple of things that we do. Sofia Refugee Support Group. We teach Japanese. We do international pressure campaigns. We also have Refugee Cafe. If any of you are interested in coming to a Refugee Cafe as a once-a-month chill with our refugee friends and our students, but we also let in high schoolers sometime if you're really mature. So you can click on this, check out our Insta, see what's happening. If you're interested in coming, send a notice, and we'd be more than happy to welcome you also. We have an open church. You can also just look up SRSG. So the people who are here, first they were Africans and Middle Easterners we got to know. Mostly they were political prisoners, victims of war, but they came not across a border, right? They flew it. That's how you have to come to Japan. That means they have connections, they have some kind of money, they have some kind of network, right? So they're different from the kinds of refugees that just cross a border on foot, leave Syria and walk into Turkey, right? And trying to figure out exactly what they are like. Let me introduce a few of our refugee friends just so you get a feeling for who they are.
What's your home country?
It's Jordan.
Jordan.
Yeah.
I'm from that area. And I was born in Benin City, Edo State, Nigeria. Alright. Okay.
Your home country is Cameroon.
Where you're from?
I'm from Georgia, but all the cities, I am Armenian. Armenian origin. My father Armenian, my mom Russian. I born in Georgia.
Came from Uganda last month.
I'm from Nigeria.
So in the class, we do background research and we interview each of the refugees, what their home life was like. Because they're way more than refugees. They're also fathers and sons and mothers and daughters, friends, right? And so we interview them about their life. We interview what happened to create the conflict that forced them to leave, their path to Japan, which is oftentimes like this, and how they're living here. We break it all down, we do it on video, and then we pop our results into into the website, which is the final project of the students. So all of their work. In high school, you write something and then you hand it to the teacher looks at it and maybe throws it away. Or maybe writes it back and then hands it to you, but that's the end of it. That's the end of your work, right? That's it. Here, all the students' work is now up publicly, right, for the whole world to see. There's a little bit of pressure, but it's a good kind of pressure, I think. So please check us out if we can. In the final 10 minutes, I want to change. So I can tell you more about the course, but it's best for you to get into Joji and then come into FLA, and then we could take the class. Why should we be thinking about the refugees and migrants in addition to passing the class? Well, if you look at here, if you look at this is actually a picture of Japan. I know it because I stole it off the Ministry of Justice website. This is what Japan thinks this is what the Ministry of Justice thinks Japan is going to be looking at like. And they're right. Right? There has been a lot of opposition to migrants and refugees for a long time, but only about 25% of the population thinks that they should. The people who think they should not accept more refugees, anybody know why? The single most common answer? Pardon me? Age? Age. Nope. Crime? Crime is up there, although just like everywhere else, the times that refugees are way disproportionately less likely than Japanese to commit any crimes. No, the biggest reason is moinai. Refugees and migrants, and all gaijin, can't sort their garbage. Now, this looks like a silly thing, but it's actually a serious thing. Because the thing underneath this is they don't know how to live here. They don't know the rules. And they will upset what's going on. That's what that actually means. So, 2020, public opinion has shifted, largely because of you guys, but not exclusively, right? Now, most people know that the number of refugees that Japan accepts is very small, and thinks that Japan should accept more refugees. Maybe with caution or whatever it is, right? But this looks like a pretty big shift. If we put the green and the red together, we're looking at almost 80% of the population thinks that in some way we should be more welcoming to refugees. This is a pretty substantial shift. So if politicians say population, the citizens are against it, that's not true. So, and this was before Ukraine. This was before and post-Ukraine, many more people were in favor of supporting refugees, right? So I used to ask questions like, should Japan accept more migrants and refugees, and what would happen if Japan accepted more, and how would we do it? But those aren't relevant questions anymore. That's not a relevant question here. Because we've already passed that time. We're past that. This means the shrinking population and the contracting labor market means that one way or another, they're all coming. And all you guys who are migrants, welcome on. Right? Today's questions are, how will Japan accept migrants and refugees? And how will we treat migrants and refugees? Right? Will they be excluded and marginalized, or will they be welcomed and incorporated? How will Japan become a more diverse and vibrant society? Because it's coming. It's happening one way or another. Otherwise, Japan will cease to exist. And this is important to you because the workplace that you guys are going to enter into is just as diverse as FLA. The workplace that you guys are going to enter into is multiracial and multicultural. Right? It'll be hard to find a pure Japanese space by the time you guys graduate. In fact, and I'll tell you something, the other thing is companies are looking for different people, different kinds of people, and they don't really care. I know the admissions office is going to be upset with me, but they don't really care about jochi. They don't care you have a jochi on your forehead, or a waseda, or a mitsubeikan, or whatever else it is. They want to see your skills. They want to see what you've developed. They want to see what you bring to the table. Because your table is going to be filled with a whole bunch of different colored people and different abled people and different kinds of people. This is what they're going to be looking for. Okay? Do you have these skills and do you have these capacities? So, they say I'm running out of time, so I will tell you just, we'll skip to the final thing about getting into FLA. In your application to FLA, luckily you've done almost everything already. You already have all your grades, right? You already have all of your scores. You will have by then. The most important piece of writing that you can do in your application is your essay. And in that essay, you need to show us who you are. You are not your scores. You are not your teacher's letters about you. You are not your grades. You are something else, right? And you have to give us a way to see who that person is. You have to show us what you're bringing to the table, what you're going to contribute to our very diverse, right, society, right? And we need to see that, and it's going to take a little while for you to figure out what it is that you really have. But you have to do a personal inventory, not a JICO PR, right? But a personal inventory to figure out what is it that you have that is nowhere else. So spend a little bit of time on that essay. That's going to be a very important part of who you are, and so we can figure out who that is. All right. Hope to see you all in my intro class next year. But wherever you go, good luck, and be sure 4 years passes just like this. It passes really quickly. So dig in wherever you go. Dig in and do something that you can walk away being proud of. Okay? Good luck, everybody.